I arrived in Breakwater Ridge with the kind of assignment that usually excites me, photographing a historic coastal storm for a national magazine. I've chased hurricanes, lightning supercells, and once even spent 2 hours trapped in a flooded subway station during a flash storm in New York. But the air here felt different the moment I stepped off the bus. Too still, too heavy, almost watchful. My name is Maya Ward, 31, a storm photographer with a talent for being in the wrong place at the right time. Or the right place at the wrong time, depends on who's asking. I've always felt weather before it happened, a strange pressure in my chest like the world inhaling sharply. That feeling hit me hard tonight. Locals warned me immediately. Not about the storm, that part they were almost casual about, but about the sea. "If the horizon turns black, don't stare at it," an old fisherman muttered in the bar. His hands shook around his glass. "It stares back." Others laughed, but not convincingly. Their smiles were too thin, their eyes sliding toward the windows every few seconds, checking the ocean as if expecting something to rise from it. By evening, the wind picked up fast. The sky thickened into bruised clouds, and the first sheets of rain hit like needles. I set up my gear along the pier, hoping for a clear angle on the incoming storm wall. But when lightning flashed, the horizon didn't light up. It swallowed the light, turning into an impossibly dark line stretching across the water. That was when I saw it. A shape, small but sharp, outlined for just a heartbeat. An island. I blinked hard. There was nothing on the map, nothing the locals mentioned except that nervous joke in the bar. Still, the silhouette was there again during the next flash, closer, clearer. Something in me tightened. Curiosity, instinct, a pull I couldn't explain. I hired a small boat from a man who refused to get any nearer than half a mile. His face was pale under the lantern light as he shoved me toward the bow. "Don't stay long, and don't look at anything that looks back." Before I could ask what he meant, he powered the engine and left me on the shore of the strange island. The storm roared overhead, but the land beneath my feet was silent, unnaturally silent. No birds, no insects, no breath of wind touching the trees. Only the outline of a tiny town ahead of me, a town that looked disturbingly familiar, and completely, impossibly empty. The first steps felt unreal, like walking onto a movie set built from someone else's memory. The buildings were small, almost toy-like, yet made with unsettling precision. Same pale siding as the houses in Breakwater Ridge. Same narrow windows. Same crooked street lamp near the pier. It was as if someone had recreated the real town in miniature, copying every detail except life itself. I lifted my camera, but my fingers hesitated on the shutter. The silence pressed in on me from every direction. Even the storm seemed muzzled here, as if the island existed inside a bubble where sound was stripped away. I snapped a photo of the main street. The flash revealed something I hadn't noticed. Shapes on the walls. I took a step closer. At first I thought it was old soot or water damage, but no, the edges were too defined. Too human, shadows not cast by anything, just stamped there. Frozen silhouettes on siding and pavement, each one stretched or twisted in a way no real person could stand. One leaned forward with its head bowed, as though whispering into the wall. Another crouched on the sidewalk, hands over where its ears should be. A taller one was bent backwards, spine arched in a painful, impossible curve. My breath caught. I turned slowly, scanning every building. They were everywhere. I lifted my camera again, needing evidence. The shutter clicked. When I checked the screen, a cold jolt ran through me. On the digital preview, the shadows weren't still. They were layered, dozens of blurred silhouettes overlapping, as if the same figure had been captured at several moments in time. All of them reaching, all of them stretching. But in front of me on the wall, the shadow remained perfectly still. A deep hum rippled through the air. Low, vibrating, almost a voice. I swallowed hard and walked farther down the miniature street. The storm intensified overhead, whined, whipping at my jacket, but the shadows stayed untouched. They didn't flicker, didn't distort. They simply existed, like stains left by people who were no longer here. I found a child-sized tricycle tipped on its side, its wheels unmoving even in the gusts. A shadow lay beside it, small, thin, legs pointing outward, as if the child had been caught mid-fall and somehow erased. "That's not possible," I whispered, though the words sounded wrong in the heavy air. Another flash of lightning. This time, I didn't need the camera to see it. Some of the shadows had changed position. Not much, barely noticeable, but enough to make my chest tighten painfully. I turned in a slow circle. The street behind me looked different, shadows angled differently, closer now, as if they'd taken one collective step while the sky blinked. The air around me buzzed again. Not wind, not thunder, something else, something aware of me. I gripped my camera like it could save me and forced myself deeper into the silent, impossible town, into its narrow heart, trying not to look at the shadows that no longer seemed entirely still. I kept walking, though every instinct told me to turn around and run back to the shore. The street narrowed between the miniature houses, and the deeper I went, the more the air thickened, like I was wading through invisible water. My flashlight beam trembled across doors, windows, fences, all of them too perfect, too carefully arranged, as if the island had memorized the real town and rebuilt it from scratch. Lightning cracked overhead. In that instant of white light, I saw it, a small shadow, a child's bolting across the street. I froze. The shadow had no child attached to it, no source, just the dark outline of someone sprinting, legs blurred, arms thrown forward. And then, as the darkness returned, it wasn't there at all. My pulse hammered in my ears. I forced my feet forward, each step softer than the last. I reached the corner and found a cracked porch with another shadow slumped against the railing, head tilted like it was listening for something. A faint scrape behind me. I turned sharply. The shadow of a man now stood on the opposite wall. A tall silhouette, shoulders hunched, its edges shivering like heat rising off asphalt. It hadn't been there a moment ago. I was sure of it. I raised my camera and snapped a shot. The preview made my stomach drop. On the screen, the tall shadow wasn't alone. There were others layered inside it, faint but visible, like all the versions of that same figure were trying to step out of one another. Some leaned forward, some crawled, some twisted their arms at wrong angles. My throat went dry. When I looked up, the shadow on the wall twitched, a small, unmistakable movement. "No," I whispered. "No, that didn't just happen." The air vibrated again, soft, rhythmic, almost like breathing. Not mine. I hurried down the street, boots splashing in shallow puddles, the storm now pounding so hard that water streamed along the pavement. But the island's strange silence clung beneath it all, muting the storm's rage. As I passed a narrow alley, something caught my eye. A shadow crouched low, hands pressed to the ground. But as the next flash lit the sky, its head snapped upward, fast, too fast, and the shape on the wall lengthened, stretching toward me. My heart lurched. I stepped back, nearly slipping. The crouched shadow wasn't alone. On the wall behind it, barely visible, was my own silhouette, except it wasn't matching me. It was turned slightly, as if looking over its shoulder at something I couldn't see. A cold shock spread through me. "My shadow," I whispered. "That's not..." The next lightning strike cut me off. Every shadow in sight shifted a few inches closer. Not slowly, not gradually, all at once, like they'd been waiting for the sky to blink. I stumbled into the main square of the miniature town, chest tight, flashlight shaking in my hands. The buildings crowded in around me, and the shadows clung to them like parasites. Some standing, some crawling, some stretching toward me as if tasting the air. A realization crept in with the rain running down my back. These shadows weren't remnants. They weren't stains. They were becoming aware that I was here. I reached the center of the miniature town, a small square with a fountain that didn't run and benches too perfectly aligned, as if placed there by someone who had never seen people actually sit. My breath fogged the air in sharp bursts. The storm raged overhead, but here, in the square, everything felt unnervingly still. Then I noticed something that froze me in place. A shadow on the fountain wall. My shadow. At least it looked like mine. Same outline, same hair tied back, same camera strap across the shoulder, but the positioning was wrong. I stood facing the fountain. The shadow was angled slightly to the left, turned toward an alley I hadn't walked through. I lifted my hand slowly. The shadow lifted its hand too, but with a delay. 1 second, 2 seconds, like it needed time to remember how to mimic me. My chest tightened. I stepped sideways. The shadow followed, late again, but smoother this time, as if learning. "Stop that," I whispered without meaning to. The shadow on the wall tilted its head. I hadn't tilted mine. A cold pulse spread down my spine. I spun in place, searching for a light source that could explain it, but the storm killed any clear shadows. The fountain's dim lantern flickered randomly, nowhere near strong enough to create something this sharp. My real shad wasn't at my feet. There was nothing. No outline, no shape. It was like I'd been cut out of the world and pasted onto the wall instead. I stumbled back, breath shaking. The shadow on the fountain kept watching me, its head still cocked at that unsettling angle. The longer I stared, the more details emerged. Subtle distortions in the arms, slightly too long fingers, a widening around the shoulders that made it look less like me and more like something trying to fit into my form. Lightning exploded overhead. Every shadow around the square lurched. Some leaned forward, some elongated sharply. Some lifted their arms like puppets pulled by invisible strings. But my shadow, the one pretending to be mine, did something worse. It stepped away from the fountain wall. Not fully. Not like a person stepping off a surface. But the darkest parts thickened, deepened, stretching outward as if peeling itself free cell by cell. I stumbled back with a gasp. "No, no, stay away from me." A dry, whispering scrape cut through the square. I whipped around. A new shadow had appeared on the ground behind me, a tall one, unfamiliar. Its edges shivered, reaching toward my boots like fingers made of smoke. Then I heard something beneath the storm, a soft, rasping murmur, like breathing that wasn't mine. It came from the fountain, from my false shadow, the pitch shifting, struggling as though trying to form a sound. A word. Lightning flashed again. For a split second, the shadow on the fountain wasn't my shape anymore. It was taller, more twisted, its limbs stretched as if pulled by multiple hands. Then the light vanished, and it snapped back into my outline. I ran. My boots splashed through the widening puddles as I darted down a narrow street. The storm's roar returned in full force, shaking the ground, but something felt different, like the island itself vibrated under my weight. The houses on either side seemed slightly shifted from where they had been minutes before, as if quietly rearranging themselves while I wasn't looking. I didn't stop until I reached a small intersection. My breath burned hot in my throat. I finally dared to look down. Still no shadow. The streetlights flickered. Every wall was coated in silhouettes, stretched, twisted, overlapping like frozen echoes. And among them, near the corner of a boarded-up store, I saw it again. My shadow, waiting, its head slowly lifted. Its hand twitched upward. And for the first time, it moved before I did, as if it wasn't following anymore, as if it was leading. I forced myself to keep moving, even though my legs felt hollow and unsteady, like they barely belonged to me. The streets were tightening around me, narrower, more distorted. The miniature houses leaned inward as if they were eavesdropping on every terrified breath I drew. I didn't know where I was running anymore. I just needed distance. Space. Somewhere the shadows weren't waiting for me, but the island was shrinking. Not physically, no, something worse. It felt like the town was folding in on itself, pulling me toward the center, toward some unseen heart that pulsed beneath the mud and stones. I stumbled into a courtyard I hadn't noticed before. The air was colder here, sharp enough to bite the inside of my lungs. A rusted metal sign hung crooked from a low archway, half buried in moss and sea salt. I brushed the grime away with trembling fingers. Here stood Blackwater, taken by the great surge. A second line sat beneath it, etched deeper, older. The town remembers those who see its shadow. My stomach dropped. The sign wasn't part of the miniature replica. It was older, original, a remnant of a place swallowed by the ocean long before Breakwater Ridge ever existed. I stepped back, my boots scraping over cracked stone, and noticed something carved into the ground, letters warped by time but still readable. Names, hundreds of them, families, children, entire bloodlines, all gone. The storm roared above me, lightning spiderwebbing across the sky. In that stark flash, the walls surrounding the courtyard came alive. Dozens of silhouettes jerked in disjointed motions, each one frozen in the posture of someone trying to run or cling to something or drag someone else to safety. And then I saw an image that made my whole body go cold. A silhouette of a woman holding a camera, her stance terrified, her outline unmistakable. Me, or someone like me, someone who had come here before. I fell to my knees, dizziness crashing through me like a wave. The ground vibrated under my palms, subtle but unmistakable, as if something massive shifted beneath the island's skin. I glanced up. My stolen shadow was there again, plastered on the courtyard wall directly ahead. Only this time, it was wrong in a new way. Its edges rippled as though it were stitched together from pieces of other silhouettes. Its head drooped sideways. One arm hung longer than the other, too long, stretching down to the ground like melting wax. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the courtyard in stark white, and the shadows moved, not toward me, not yet, but toward my shadow, merging into it, seeping into its shape, feeding it. Layer after layer of human silhouettes pulled themselves into the form wearing my outline. Their limbs tangled, their angles sharpening, their proportions shifting into something tall and skeletal. A realization crept over me with sickening clarity. These weren't ghosts. They weren't echoes. They were fragments, pieces of the drowned townspeople, still trapped between existence and oblivion. And they were trying to remake themselves by assembling a new body. A new host, me. The buzzing air thickened, vibrating at a pitch that hurt my teeth. The shadows on the wall writhed, fusing together into a single figure, darker than anything cast by the storm, darker than nature allowed. I stumbled backward, my boots skidding. "Stay away from me," I rasped. The dark figure lifted its head slowly, agonizingly, as if the movement required pulling against 1,000 invisible anchors. Then it raised one arm, my arm. Not mimicking me this time, but choosing the gesture itself. My breath hitched. It wasn't copying anymore. It was practicing. The storm suddenly dipped, the wind dropping into an eerie lull. Rain softened. The sky dimmed to a bruised, unnatural gray. The island exhaled, settling into a silence deeper than anything I'd felt since landing here. I heard the ocean retreating. The island was preparing to disappear again. And the shadows, now moving with fluid purpose, were preparing not to disappear with it. The dark figure wearing my shape stepped forward, peeling from the wall like tar come alive. And for the first time, I understood. The drowned town didn't just remember its dead. It wanted replacements. The courtyard warped around me as the figure peeled itself from the wall. The air thickened until every breath felt like dragging ice down my throat. I backed away, palms slick with rain, but the dark shape moved with a slow, deliberate confidence, as if it knew the ground belonged to it and not to me. I spun toward the archway, desperate to escape into the street, but the space beyond had changed. The miniature town was no longer arranged in neat, familiar lines. The houses leaned inward at impossible angles. Doorways had shrunk to thin slits. Streets twisted like coiled rope, all leading back toward the courtyard, toward it. The island wasn't letting me leave. A crackling hum rippled across the stones beneath my feet. The names carved into them flickered faintly, as though illuminated from below. And then the ground trembled, soft at first, then harder, rhythmically, like something massive shifting in the deep earth, or in the deep water. I darted toward the nearest alley, refusing to accept the reality bending around me. My boots splashed through a stream of dark water that hadn't been there seconds earlier. The shadows clung to the walls on either side, trembling like they were waiting for the next lightning strike to leap. I sprinted, heart hammering against my ribs with brutal force. But every turn led me somewhere I had already been, sometimes a second ago, sometimes many minutes ago. The town looped illogically, folding like pages in a book shuffled out of order. "Let me out!" I gasped, slamming my shoulder into a warped door. The knob twisted under my fingers, but the door opened to nothing, just wet darkness, stretching infinitely downward. A vertical ocean. I staggered back. The shadows jittered across the walls, shaking like they were hungry. Then I heard a new sound, faint at first, footsteps, not behind me, next to me. I whipped around. My shadow stood a few feet away, not flattened on a wall, not stretched across the ground, but upright. A vertical smear of darkness wearing my outline like a costume. It didn't walk so much as glide, its feet not touching the ground. The storm's dim light slid over it without ever landing. Its head tilted just as mine had earlier, but sharper, wrong, too far. A mocking imitation of human movement. "Stop!" I whispered. The word escaped without control, fragile and shaking. The shadow lifted its arm again, not mimicking, not practicing, reaching. I bolted. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to move before the storm swallowed its last breath and dragged the island back into whatever abyss it came from. My lungs burned. The wind howled. The sky cracked open with another jagged branch of lightning, and every shadow in sight lurched toward me. Some scrambled on all fours, some elongated like rubber. Some slithered against the walls in fluid, serpentine motions. Their movements weren't human, but their intentions were unmistakable. They were closing in. I darted into a side street I didn't recognize, newly formed maybe. The houses here were warped and sinking, tilted as if collapsing into soft mud. Rainwater streamed from the roofs like waterfalls. At the end of the street was a small pier, a miniature version of Breakwater Ridge's dock, complete with tiny posts and a lantern flickering violently. The real shoreline. If I could just reach it, a violent tremor rolled under my feet. The pier shook like something had struck it from below. The island was sinking. I sprinted harder, lungs screaming. The pier seemed to stretch farther away with each step, the distance warping like elastic. I forced myself to look forward, not back, but I felt them, the shadows, gathering behind me, multiplying, closing in with silent, feverish hunger. "Not me," I choked out. "I'm not staying. You can't keep me here." The wind abruptly died. The rain halted midair for half a heartbeat, suspended like a held breath. Then a whisper, not a voice, but a vibration crawled across my skin. "You will stay if you look back." My knees buckled. I stumbled, catching myself on cold, slick stone. The pier was only a few yards away. A few impossible, unreachable yards. The shadows surged forward behind me. I heard them scraping against the walls, dragging across the ground, slipping closer with every ragged breath I took. I stared straight ahead, refusing to turn, refusing to meet them. But then, a reflection in the rainwater pooled at my feet. Not mine. A towering shape made of 1,000 silhouettes fused together, wearing my outline like a mask. And it was reaching for my shoulder. The boat rocked violently beneath me as I forced the oars through the black water. Every stroke felt wrong, like the sea resisted my escape, pulling back with a weight that wasn't physical. My arms burned, my lungs ached, but I didn't dare slow down. Behind me, the island flickered, appearing, disappearing, its streets bending like reflections in shattered glass. The storm reached a pitch I had never heard before, a howl that vibrated along my spine. Lightning split the sky, and for one terrible second the island was illuminated in full. The streets empty, the buildings warped, and the shadows, Those human-shaped horrors, crowding along the shore, watching me leave with their stretched, trembling silhouettes. One of them raised an elongated arm toward me, not in threat, in longing. As if begging me to return, I rowed harder. The sea surged, tossing the boat sideways. My camera bag slammed against my leg. I clutched it instinctively, my only proof, my only anchor to reality. Another flash lit the sky, and I saw the island break apart like melting film stock, dissolving into the storm. Then nothing. Silence. The sea went still so abruptly it felt like a trap. I turned back. The island was gone. Not faded or distant, gone completely, as if the storm had swallowed the land whole. I drifted until the lights of Breakwater Ridge came into view, faint but real. Solid. Human. The moment my feet touched the dock, an unfamiliar exhaustion washed over me, not relief, but a heavy dread settling in my bones. At the motel, I opened my camera to check the photos. Every image was perfect. Crisp, detailed, except one. The very last shot I took, the one where I photographed myself by accident, now showed a silhouette standing directly behind me, and its shadow was still growing.